Hi and hello, everyone, and welcome to my show, The Lucas Alexander Show. I'm Lucas Alexander in Copenhagen, Denmark. It's the 15th of May, 2024, and this is part of my special tribute series, remembering the Queen of Rock, Tina Turner, who passed away exactly 1 year ago on the 24th of May, 2023. During this series, I've been interviewing a lot of fascinating people who knew and worked with Tina Turner or who has written biographies about her. And today we have a fascinating and extraordinary guest who really truly knew Tina from back in the days of the Ike and Tina Turner Revue. In fact, his career started when he met Ike and Tina Turner. He became the most legendary rock and roll photographer. He photographed and became very close friends with John Lennon, Yoko Ono, Chuck Berry, the Sex Pistols, the Ramones, Led Zeppelin, Alice Cooper, Iggy Pop, David Bowie, you name it. He photographed all of them. But it all started with Ike and Tina Turner, and it's a thrill and a wonderful thing for me today to welcome on my show Bob Gruen. Good evening from Copenhagen, Denmark, and welcome to all of you watching my show, The Lucas Alexander Show. Please like my video, subscribe to my channel, and leave your comments in the comment section below. I have a fascinating show today, my special tribute series remembering the Queen of Rock, Tina Turner. I'm joined by the most legendary rock photographer who really captured the essence of the rock and roll era of the 1970s and the 1980s, and of course the 90s and up until now. He has taken some of the most iconic photographs in rock and roll history. And it's a great honor for me to have on my show today, joining me from New York City, the great Bob Gruen. Thank you so much, Bob, for being with me today.
My pleasure.
So, Bob, before we go into hearing more about your backstory and your life story, and we will be concentrating specifically on your work and your friendship with Tina Turner and the Ike and Tina Turner Revue, we'll also hear stories about your friendship and work with John Lennon and Yoko Ono and a lot of these other people you photographed. We'll see how much we can get through today, and then maybe we can do a part two at some point. But basically, first of all, I'd like to take a couple of minutes to just tell you a little bit about when I got to know you or became aware of you. And it's been most of my life. Because when I was 8 years old, my life changed when I discovered Tina Turner. She was the most amazing, iconic female performer. I had never seen anything like it.
What year was that?
Oh, that was way back in the 80s when Tina could not be a bigger star, actually.
Right.
And I became very interested in her before anybody else, before I went into the rock scene myself, and before I got to know a lot of other artists and bands. And that was after her comeback and Private Dancer and all of that. So she was everywhere. And I got her autobiography. And I always looked at photographs, looked at who had taken the photographs, what was the photo credit, and also on the album covers in the sleeve there, you could read where was that album recorded. Bolix Sound Recording Studios. But in her autobiography, I, Tina, from 1986, and a lot of other photo books that was published at the time with Tina. There were so many pictures in there, and there was that name underneath every picture always, Bob Gruen. And you've really taken some of the most iconic pictures of Tina Turner during all of those years. And we'll see some of them on the show today. So ever since I was 8 years old, I've known about Bob Gruen and your pictures. And interestingly enough, when my life expanded, I started to look into other bands and became interested in rock and roll in general and the more hardcore rock and roll and the punk scene. I noticed that all of those pictures, a lot of them were taken again by photo credit Bob Gruen. It was so fascinating because some years later, I met the Queen of Punk from Germany that I married, Nina Hagen.
Really?
And then I discovered when she brought me along to New York,
What year?
huh,
What year was that? What year was that?
that must have been around the year 2000. So that was
Oh,
like early in my life, but of course, much, much later in your life. And then I discovered all of those pictures that you also took of Nina Hagen. You took of all of these people that I had this great, amazing opportunity to also meet. People like Blondie, Debbie Harry, and lots of those people, they were taken by you. So to wrap that up, in 2016, I went to Nutbush, to Tennessee, where that was Tina Turner's hometown. We all remember the song Nutbush City Limits. I was there with Rhonda Graham, who was the Ike and Tina Turner tour manager and personal manager. She became the personal assistant for Tina Turner and her close friend throughout all of the years, for 55 years. And I got to interview her in Brownsville, Tennessee, at the Tina Turner Museum. And when we had that conversation, we were again talking about Bob Gruen and the fact that you had taken so many excellent pictures and released this DVD with rare footage of the Ike and Tina Turner Revue from 1971 and 1972. So this was a long rant and a long introduction. Sorry about that, but I really just wanted to set the scene of how your name always came up. So it is a great honor and privilege for me today to have you on my show. So thank you very much.
but that's kind of
Our
amazing
story.
because I was always a big fan of Nina Hagen and met her in New York more like 1981, I think, around that time. Um, and I remember she also made a duet record with a friend of mine in Brazil, Supla, and uh, and so she's good friends with him. Although I haven't seen her in a million years now, but I do remember seeing her in the '80s.
Yes, and I
And
saw
big
some
fan
of
of
those amazing
her
pictures.
sound. A big fan of her sound. I like the records.
She was quite extraordinary and still
Yeah,
is, but at that time she could do like 5 octaves and do the opera and the growling and all of these things. So she
yeah,
was unusual and extraordinary, and she inspired a lot of the artists today, like Madonna, and also the look of
right.
Lady Gaga and all these people.
In there because, like I say, I was a big fan.
Great, that's wonderful. And we can get into some of that and some of the stories about that as well. But that was just to set the scene here from my backstory and the fact that I have known you most of my life, known of you, obviously. So this
Okay,
is really exciting and a great honor for me to talk to you today here.
all right. Well, actually, my backstory starts with Tina Turner. Kind of. I mean, after high school, I got into photography because my mom, it was her hobby, and my mom taught me how to develop and print pictures, and I kind of got good at it. They gave me my first camera when I was 8. And then after high school, I lived with a rock and roll band. I tried a couple of colleges, but that didn't work. And I was taking pictures for them and just beginning to get a couple of feelers into the music business because my friends had gotten a contract with Atlantic Records. And then I saw Ike and Tina Turner, and I was just totally blown away the first time I saw Tina. They were opening for Sam and Dave, and I remember Tina dancing and dancing off the stage to a strobe light, and I was just mesmerized. And I think I was watching the curtain. I think Sam and Dave came on and did a show, but I was still looking at the curtain, just thinking about Tina. I was just so I mean, I remember the feeling. I had never seen anything as exciting and fantastic, open and free as Tina and Ike Tina Revue. And I was lucky they played a few shows around New York that week, because a few days later they played at a place in Queens, a small club called the Honka Monka Room. You can't make that kind of name up. It's so old fashioned. But at the Honka Monka Room, I saw them, and it was a basement with a linoleum floor. The stage is probably a foot high, a very funky little club. But they did an amazing show, and I was taking pictures. The first time I took pictures of someone not my friend's band. You know, it was the first time I took a camera to another act, and just took pictures, not for anybody. I didn't have any contacts with a magazine or anything like that. But I just took pictures because I was so blown away by Tina. And at the end of her show, I knew the strobe light was coming on, and I only had a few frames left, so I opened the camera to 1 second to see maybe I get a few of those flashes in one picture, see what would happen. And the other 3 or 4 pictures are useless, but one of the pictures is one of the best pictures I ever took. It's a multiple image. It's like 5 images of Tina in one picture. It's not Photoshop or anything. It's 1 second while the strobe light was flashing, but they all came just in the right place where Tina's throwing her arm up, and it's the most exciting picture I have.
It's so iconic, that picture. It's so amazing.
And I took a couple other good pictures that night. And a few days later, we went to see Ike Tina again. They played a theater in the Round in New Jersey. And I brought the pictures just to show to my friends that we were meeting there. And on the way out, one of my friends saw Ike Turner going from one dressing room to another, because the dressing rooms were trailers outside of the theater was a round thing. So she literally pushed me in front of Ike and said, "Show Ike the pictures." And he stopped and he said, "What pictures?" And I showed him the pictures I had. And he said, "Oh, these are good pictures. I got to show these to Tina." And he took me in the dressing room, and all of a sudden Tina Turner was looking at my pictures, and I was having trouble breathing. She was liking my pictures. And he said, "Meet me in New York next week." And he introduced me to a publicist. And then that publicist, he bought some of those pictures, but he took me to a party where I met another publicist. And that guy introduced me to Alice Cooper Management, and he took me to MCA Records and had them hire me to shoot Elton John. And my career just started snowballing from there on. Every time I went to shoot a job or do something, I would meet more people, and they'd hire me to do something else. And I just got good at it.
So things happen, like law of attraction, like you said, snowballing. Like
Yeah.
one thing led to the other, and you immediately got into this circle of the most iconic and amazing artists.
Really well. They'd opened for the Rolling Stones, and we were coming up. It was after River Deep Mountain High. River Deep Mountain High was the #1 in England and in a lot of the world. In the United States, it did not get into the top 10. It's Phil Spector said it's the reason he quit show business, that when America didn't understand Ike and Tina, he quit. He just said they don't get it.
Well, because of the segregation, right?
Yeah. There was a lot of prejudice against them. Although the majority of their audience actually was white. It was young and white and rock and roll, because they were not playing the typical blues and soul music. They were playing rock and roll. And, Ike Turner's credited with recording the first rock and roll song, the Rocket 88. Anyway, I did a lot of work with them then. They came back to New York. They played Carnegie Hall the following spring, and then they played in a place, the International Youth Festival in the summer of '71. And I started taking more and more pictures. And at the Youth Festival, I took a really good picture of Tina in the spotlight, and I wanted to show it to Ike. I thought it would make a good album cover. And I went to meet him in Washington, and it was actually a very long story. I wrote an autobiography, Right Place, Right Time. And the whole story is in my autobiography there. But anyway, I went to Washington. I met Ike. That was a Saturday. He took me to Los Angeles. I did not go to sleep until the following Friday night on my way home. It was the longest week I ever spent. On the Thursday of that week, Ike had me spend the day with Tina. She was cooking at home and then taking the kids to soccer practice. And then we went shopping, and I was taking pictures of her the whole way. And actually, there's one picture of her holding about 3 loaves of Wonder Bread. I mean, she had 5 kids at home between her and Ike and Ann Thomas. There's a few different mothers and fathers, but there was 5 kids in the house. And there's a cute picture of Tina with all the loaves of bread. But then when she was paying for the groceries, I took a profile picture of her, and that turned out to be my first album cover. So you never know where you're going to get a good picture. But
Enough said from
enough said
1971.
with the album title, and it's a really nice side portrait of Tina. But then I went on, kept on working with them. We at the time I had bought in 1970. I bought the world's first available video recorder. Sony made a videotape machine that was portable. It's kind of funny to me to see everybody has a cell phone that can take color, stereo, whatever, beautiful videos on the spot. Back then in 1970, this was a reel-to-reel tape recorder that you would thread. It was a 5-inch reel of tape, and you would thread the tape through the tape recorder, like old-fashioned style, and then carry this tape recorder, which was attached by a wire to a big video camera. It was shot in black and white. It only worked pretty much in daylight. It was pretty difficult in the low light. It was mono sound, and it was a modern miracle and state-of-the-art technology at the time. Because before that, the only way you could record a band is to make a film, and you would have to shoot the film and then get the film developed somewhere and then get a screening room and show the film in a projector. Whereas with the videotape, we can tape a show and then go right into the dressing room or into the hotel and hook it up to any TV and show it back immediately. So it was the first time that a band could see themselves right away after a show. And for Tina and the Ikettes, since they had such choreography, this was an amazing improvement that they loved it when I came around because they could actually see their show 10 minutes after they walked off the stage. And they could say, oh, look, we're turning left. Maybe we should turn right over there. And they would improve the act like that.
They fussing at you about your talking. Yeah. You understand that? You about yeah, I know. They say that about home.
Yeah, I know what you say this band. Yeah, I know, and that's not what I heard.
That's all he said.
No, he didn't. What he said? Yeah, I know. He said what? Yeah, I can understand you. No, not now.
I didn't say you.
Oh, you didn't know what you said. That's why I don't even know what you said.
The way we've been working is because of the potential of our show being as exciting as it is. And we couldn't rely on records, so therefore we had to keep the show strengthened to play for all the different audience, many different audience as we have been playing for.
She's known as the hardest working little lady in show business today. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a great big round of applause for Miss Tina Turner?
So they really liked it when I would come around. I didn't have any planned schedule. I was kind of already on the coke at the time, and things were kind of chaotic. So it wasn't corporate like today, where you'd make an appointment 3 months in advance and talk to 2 lawyers about it. Back then I just showed up. I was there for 2 days. I would peel off $200 bills and say, "Come back next time." And I just had a ball hanging out with them. And there was one time when a woman, who was at that time? There was a woman wanted to. I met the woman who was booking shows in the Beacon Theater here in New York in 1974, I think it was. And by that time, I'd been in touch with Ike Tina for a while, and she was 74. Let me just see here. I have some notes here of when I saw them. It might have been earlier than that. I don't actually have a picture from that show. I have a feeling it was like 72, but when they played Carnegie Hall.
Carnegie Hall was about 1st of April 1971.
71? No.
Because
Carnegie Hall.
they did that famous album, that live album.
Yes, yeah, but the Beacon Theater, when was that?
Oh, that I don't
4
know.
days over Thanksgiving.
But that could have been any time. I mean,
I think it was 4 days over Thanksgiving. I think it was 72 because I was already involved at that time. But it was still early. And like I said, I met the woman who was in charge, and she wanted to book them and didn't know how to reach Ike because he was traveling, and it wasn't the normal situations. Back then it was phone calls, and he was never there. So he was always traveling somewhere. So anyway, I told her I could talk to Ike. I could go to the show and deliver the message. So we went to Syracuse, but when Ike would be on coke, he'd be up for a couple of days, and then when he would run out or get to the end of the run, he would sleep for a couple of days. So when I showed up in Syracuse, unfortunately, he was just into his sleeping couple of days mode, and I actually traveled with the band from there to like Burlington, Vermont, I think the next day. But up in Burlington, I got to talk to Ike, and I told him about the beginning. He said, "Yeah, sure, tell the lady, I'll talk to her." And I remember she actually chartered a plane and flew up to Vermont, and I introduced her to Ike, and I made a deal to play at the Beacon Theater. And then Ike said, "Come along." And I was with my wife, Nadia, at the time, and we were making videotapes and taking pictures. And that's when Ike took us to California for about 2 weeks, or a month, actually. We spent that's right. We went to, I don't know. Anyway, read my book, Right Place, Right Time. It's all in there. In the book, I have everything in the right order. We checked out all the dates and everything.
Well, people should definitely get a copy of your book. We would still like to have some of these amazing stories. And I also want to tell people that what you're actually talking about is this particular DVD here that I have. Obviously, let me see so that the light doesn't get into it. On the Road with Ike and Tina, 1971 and 1972. And there's also a great booklet inside here where people can get a lot of information and and all
a whole
of the
bunch
stuff
more
that
of my
you
are in there.
I bought it as soon as it came out, and what you captured there, what you filmed during those 2 years, and you knew them for a lot longer, obviously, but those two it's kind of magical because nobody had ever seen any band like that. It was so private, so amazing, so in-depth. Tina cooking at home, the sons, even the dog and the Ikettes, and On the Road. It's like it gives a totally different in-depth insight view to what was going on behind the scenes there. And boy, have we heard a lot about their marriage, and it would be wonderful to get into all of that and some of the people that you knew through.
Well, that's why the video really shows the good side of their marriage. There was a reason why they were together for 20 years. It was not your traditional hearts and flowers kind of marriage. When I met them, like I said, it was Tina in the house, and when Ike and Tina met and Tina got pregnant, they already had 3 kids between them. I forget who had 2 and who had 1, but they already had 3 kids. Ronnie, the kid that they had together, is the 4th child. And then Ike had a child with Ann Thomas, who was one of the Ikettes.
Yeah, Mia.
So when I got there in 71, there was 5 kids in the house, from different marriages and connections. So, and that was considered quite okay. I mean, it's interesting. The first book that Tina wrote is really good. The Ike Tina book, but in the second book, she's much more open and truthful about the relationship and about how she was kind of the head mama of Ike's harem. You know, that Ike was had many girlfriends at the time, and that was considered okay because he was the man and he was like that, you know, and that's what he did.
Yeah, but she certainly didn't like it. She certainly did not
well,
like
no,
it.
she didn't like it, but she did it. You know, and they all did it. I mean, that was the way that society was constructed. You know, that's the way that they were living together. At the time, it didn't seem unusual because they were all accepting of it. I never saw Ike hit anybody. It was always understood that Ike was powerful and that if you crossed him, you might get in trouble, but nobody ever suggested that he would hit somebody. You know, it was kind of a big surprise when I read her book and heard, you know, those kind of details because I never saw it.
So you never saw him be violent to Tina or to anybody
I never
else?
saw him be violent.
We did hear about that a lot. Obviously, it's become like the legendary myth. I mean, we hear about Hitler in politics, the devil in religion, and Ike Turner in rock and roll. I mean, he really got a very bad rap, didn't he? So
he certainly did. He should not be the poster boy. You know, the way I think about Ike is a really good man who took way too much cocaine, and cocaine will twist your mind. And if you've been awake, I mean, he was awake 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 days in a row. I think the longest was like 18 days, more than 2 weeks without any sleep and enjoying it, theoretically. But it makes you kind of twisted and short-tempered. And so I don't doubt that he hit people. I'm just saying I never saw it.
Because you were a photographer and you were even filming them, obviously he would not let you see something like that because, I mean, it could be untaped.
No, it wasn't. I was not on assignment as a press person. I was kind of accepted as one part of the entourage. And anything he would do in front of the musicians, he would do in front of me. It wasn't he was afraid of being caught because he trusted me a lot. I mean, I had a very unique relationship with Ike where we really trusted each other and we became kind of close.
Would you say that you were closer to Ike at that point than with Tina?
Well, certainly I was hanging out more with Ike because we were just in the studio getting high all the time and Tina was in the house with the kids. But my wife got closer to Tina, actually, and helped Tina on her her initiation into her spiritual journey. Because my wife was very involved in those kind of teachings.
Oh,
and so they actually formed a pretty close relationship.
Yeah, and you see some of that in that DVD that you put out, where your wife Nadia at the time are talking to Tina in the studio as well. Some really amazing conversations there.
Yeah, Nadia conducts a lot of the interview parts, and I was just pictures or videoing. Yeah, we made it very much together. It was a joint operation.
But a lot of people, of course, did not see what happened behind closed doors. But I mean, we have heard people like P.P. Arnold, that famous singer who went to England, who was a former Ikeette. She had a big hit in England and and also around the world, I think. She was a former Ikeette, and she said she was raped by Ike and saw him hit Tina. And even Etta James, that legend, she also said that she saw him beat her in the dressing room really violently. A lot of people have said that.
A lot of stories like that. All I'm saying is I never saw it.
Right.
I only have my opinion. I mean, you know, I was there when I was there. I saw what I saw. I never saw that.
Talk about your experiences and talk about what a great guy that Ike also was.
Right. He didn't just sit around hitting people all day. I went to Ike's funeral because he had done so much for me, and there was over 1,000 people there because Ike had done so much for them. If you needed a car, if you needed help to get rid of a boyfriend, if you needed a job, whatever you needed, Ike would help out. Money just flowed around Ike. He didn't ask questions about it. He was a very giving person. But yeah, cocaine will twist your mind and make you violent. And I'm sure that's what happened with him.
A lot of people also say that he could be really charming and very nice, and of course to help people a lot.
Yes, absolutely.
So talk about your experience as being in the presence of Tina and also at that time, because obviously in the 80s she like became this legend, this huge superstar, even bigger than with Ike and Tina. And in those days it was more homey, more you could get more personal and private with her. What was she like back then in front of you? Talk about some of the times, the conversations. How did you experience Tina?
Well, I saw Tina. She was always very much, down to earth, uh, sensible person. She did not get high. While uh, Ike was doing all the coke a lot. He didn't really smoke anything or smoke any pot or drink. A lot of the band boys would drink and smoke pot and take coke. Tina drank water, or maybe juice or something. I remember after the show, she would have we'd go to a diner and she would get meatloaf and potatoes and peas, basic meat and potatoes person. But I never saw Tina get high. I actually did have dinner with her once in Paris where we had a glass of wine and she was a little giddy in a sense, but that's what you do in Paris. It wasn't like she was, drinking at a party, we have a few. It was like a glass of wine with dinner. Is the most I ever saw her take as far as any kind of drugs or anything.
Bob, in Paris, was that when you took that iconic photo of Tina in front of the Eiffel Tower?
Yes. I was kind of lucky. I mean, in my life, like I say, it's the one thing, I get in the right place at the right time. I actually took a trip to my mother's hometown in Hungary. And on the way back, I decided I didn't want to fly over Paris, just go back to New York. So I stopped in Paris and made a few phone calls to find out what was going on. And somehow I found out that Tina was making a videotape promotion for some French TV company. There's another picture of her with the TV star, the French star in a sports car you might have seen. But it was out across the river from the Eiffel Tower, and it was just beautiful. For just a couple of minutes, she was just standing there posing. We took some great pictures as kind of an iconic Tina in Paris. It's just, something about Tina and the Eiffel Tower. They're just so elegant and just so timeless. And she just falls into a pose immediately. I mean, it's not hard to take a picture of Tina Turner. She always looks great. So it was a really nice.
And what about all those people that must have been standing around there, all the tourists? She was standing there in like the shortest mini dress and looking like Tina. It must have been amazing, wasn't it?
Well, we did have a bit of an entourage. There was a video crew and some managers and handlers and whatever. They're not in the picture, but they were there. But then Tina invited me to come along for dinner, and so we had a really nice French dinner in a basement somewhere. That was just fabulous. And she was always just so real and so basic. And even after she got all the fame and everything, she herself never seemed to change. She was always a very real person. I always like a band or an act that communicates with the audience. Some acts come out and they just play their record. Like, you came to hear the music and here's the music. But Tina said, you came here to meet me, and to see me. So she would always start her show from the beginning. Whenever I saw her, she would come out and say, hi, everybody. And if the audience didn't say hi, Tina, she would say it again. I said, hi, everybody. And when they would say hi, Tina, then she'd start her show. But she first made that connection. And then she would continue to talk to the audience and connect with them. And so many performers don't do that. But that's what makes a good performance, is when the act connects with you and you feel personally that they're talking to you.
Well, as an original rock fan, which is what you were in the beginning, and you started being a music fan as well. How was Tina different from everybody else on the scene? I mean, obviously she stayed around for many, many decades, for 55 years.
Tina had an ability to communicate more passion and more feeling of excitement and freedom than anybody else I've seen. You see, for me, rock and roll is all about freedom. It's about the freedom to express your feelings very loudly in public. And it's all about that feeling when everybody's screaming yay and nobody's thinking about paying the rent. You kind of get out of yourself for a few minutes. And Tina had the ability to get people out of themselves for a whole 90 minutes or 2 hours even, While you were seeing Tina, you weren't thinking about anything else because she was mesmerizing. Some people are just so charismatic and just connect that you can't take your eyes off them. And that's the way Tina was.
Was she like that to you also behind the scenes, backstage at home? I mean, even though she was cooking and everything we see on that DVD that you filmed, which is so amazing, priceless to any Tina fan, and I urge everybody to get a copy of that DVD on the road with Ike and Tina. But also, I mean, was she also charismatic, something beyond? We all say she was like an alien from outer space. She was unique because there
Well,
was
I
some
wouldn't
kind
say
of
she
an
was.
energy there.
Yeah, I wouldn't say she was an alien because she was very human, and there was a tremendous energy there. When you would meet her, you're meeting somebody special. Some people are special. Some people are not boring. Like you meet people and you go, "Wow, that's a special person." And Tina was special all the time.
And at that time, she appeared to be, you just said she was so free on stage and represented freedom in a way in rock and
Mm-hmm.
roll and being so dynamic and wild on stage. But she was actually in this, well, in captivity. That's what she said.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was not women's lib at the time. She was not like Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, Jimi Hendrix, and that all these people that sadly died at 27. And she was not part of the punk scene, but she was still like a symbol for all of these people in a way. I mean, Jimi Hendrix
Mm-hmm.
started playing guitar in the Ike and Tina Turner Revue, and Ike fired him
Right.
because he couldn't keep still on the guitar. And
Yeah.
Janis's favorite female star was icon was Tina. So I mean, it all she was kind of there before everybody else, right?
And she taught Mick Jagger how to dance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Tina did a lot. She influenced a lot. She was a great, great influence. And by the way, my videos, because DVDs are a little hard to come by nowadays. Nobody's got a slot to play them anymore. I don't know how it is in Europe, but it's streaming online. You can find it. It's Ike and Tina Turner, 1971, 72. And it's on a channel called Night Flight. I think it costs a couple of dollars to see it on Night Flight. But yeah, it's a great video. And the only video of Ike and Tina that's actually them being them, besides just a performance on a show.
And that was
You know,
also some of the footage that you filmed, Bob, was also in that amazing documentary. I think was kind of prize winning to 2021 that was made
right,
about Tina, and they showed
right.
some of your footage,
Yeah,
and I
all the
think it was
early footage in that documentary is mine. A lot of my photos are in that. Uh,
yeah, and
we
some
did
of the
a lot
most
of work.
iconic pictures also that you took of Tina. I mean that we know of were taken by you as well. But I mean, can you just talk a little bit? What will be the legacy of Tina Turner in show business, but also for people in general now that she has passed away? And what did her passing mean to you? How did you respond to hearing that she had
Well,
died?
I'm not a critic, so I can't predict how society is going to react to her. All I know is everybody who ever saw her thought she was amazing. Uh, when she passed, I was very sad, but I knew that she had been ill for a while. And I'm at an age now where I'm losing a lot of friends, so it's not unusual. I'm 78 years old now, and I only know a couple of people my age. It's not easy to grow old in the rock and roll world. For some reason, I did. I saw a T-shirt the other day, which I totally agree with. It's really weird to be the same age as old people, and that's the way I feel.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing, especially what you saw, what you
Mm,
lived through and during all of those years. But before we move on to anything else, I still have more questions about Tina and that world.
mm.
I had the good fortune, I went to Nutbush and with Rhonda Graham,
Oh,
the tour
oh, really?
manager of Ike and Tina. And of course, she is a very important player in the whole Ike and Tina legacy. And she was
Mm.
also continued to be the personal assistant to Tina and a good friend throughout all those years. What was Rhonda Graham like to you? What was that experience? I guess you got to work with her a lot.
When I met Ike Tina, Rhonda was a 28-year-old redhead from Biloxi, Mississippi. She wore leather hot pants and a spiked dog collar, like punk style, 10 years before there was punks, and she was tough. nobody would cross Rhonda Graham. She was the manager of Ike and Tina and about a dozen, band members and roadies, and took them across the country and around the world. She was a very tough lady, but I always got along with her very well. I never tried to cross her or anything. I wouldn't want to do that, but you wouldn't want to be on Rhonda's bad side, I'll say that. But I was always on her good side, and I always had a very good feeling about her. And although I wasn't in touch for a number of years after Tina stopped touring, when they started making the movie and I got back in touch, I was very surprised that it was still Rhonda. It was the same operation I've been involved with for 50 years. And that was very reassuring. Unfortunately, Rhonda passed away before Tina even. And we lost both of them within a couple of months, or within a couple of years, I think.
It was very sad to see that Rhonda passed away before Tina, and also Tina's two own sons, the one with Ike, Ronnie, and Craig that she had with the saxophone player, well, before Ike.
Yeah.
He also passed away just before that. It was an extreme loss for Tina just before she went after having been ill for a long time. So obviously we all knew Rhonda as a tough cookie, but also the one that got everything done. And I think also a great heart of gold in there, because she was quite extraordinary. But everybody also said that she was a white woman leading the way in a way and opening doors for Ike and Tina during the segregation in the early 60s, well, before Martin Luther King changed the whole game there, and black people were more integrated with the white rock scene.
Right. Yeah, well, it was unusual. She was an unusual woman. Like I say, she was pretty tough. Biloxi, Mississippi is a tough place. It's kind of a rough and tumble neighborhood, kind of town.
So what about some of those women that Ike had at the time? Obviously and famously, Ann Thomas was somebody who kind of also lived with them, and we see a very interesting moment in your film that you captured, and Tina was not shy of giving her some shade there in the dressing room before going on stage, mentioning that she was looking at Ike, and obviously they had the child together, and later on when Tina fled and ran away from Ike, he actually married Ann Thomas for some years.
Yeah, well, she was beautiful. And he would strut around with the two of them. It was like the two most gorgeous black women, and all three of them wearing expensive fur coats, and it was quite an entourage. Yeah, and like I say, at the time, that was totally accepted among the group. Everybody knew that Tina was wife number one, Ann Thomas was wife number two, and the other girlfriends were like fly by night, but that was okay too. That's just the way it was. You can look at it in hindsight with today's, kind of binoculars on and say, oh my God, what was happening? But what was happening was accepted by the people that were doing it. Nobody was objecting to the situation. For whatever reasons, personal reasons that they found that they wanted to be in that situation, they chose to be there.
Did you also know a woman that worked for them called Anne Kane?
No.
She married Otis Williams from the Temptations.
No, I don't know.
She was also a mistress, but she was also doing the whole the managing side. Maybe that was before you got to know them in the 60s.
Probably. They were popular all through the late 50s into the 60s. They met in like 55, and it didn't break up until 75. So I only came in around 1970, 71.
1971 was such an amazing year for Ike and Tina. It was like almost like 1970 when their album Working Together came out, and they did Proud Mary. But it's almost like 1971 was that amazing time for them, and 1972. So it's like you were there at the most pivotal, amazing, great time for them.
It was kind of the peak of their careers, Ike and Tina. They came back from 69, they opened for the Rolling Stones and got really popular. And then they had River Deep Mountain High, which was the biggest song they did. And then Proud Mary, which actually became kind of a hit in America, the way they did it. We don't do nothing nice and easy, I mean, it was a big hit. I remember, in the audience, I remember hearing the audience react to Tina, and it was just such swells of excitement. And in those days, Ike was a popular guy. People liked him. Nobody knew the backstory. And there were jokes that they made that you couldn't make nowadays. About Ike would say at one point, "Don't bring home no fish because Papa's going to bring home enough crabs." Which was like a sexual joke, which was you can't say those kind of things nowadays, but back then that was funny. you know.
It's almost like the world has changed, not for the better. That in fact, that today with this whole woke thing, you can't say anything or do anything, and people get offended all the time. It's almost
Right.
like the revolution was back then, the progress was back then. Rock and roll was changed everything, and now everything is polished and fake
Now
in a
people are
way.
more conservative and they're much more scared. If you hear the wrong word, it's a trigger because it reminds you of something. I mean, life is like that. You have good and bad experiences, and sometimes you remember the good and sometimes you remember the bad. But to blame it on somebody else, like you said a word and that reminded me of something that hurt me, I don't know about that. How that works. I'm too old to understand that. For me, some of the rules that kids are coming up with nowadays, I just don't understand it. How people can talk. I do understand how people were kind of obnoxious to each other back then. And it was sort of accepted as that's the way it was. I don't mind that they don't do that anymore. That's okay.
Yeah, probably not, but everything is more like the people, well, policing each other in a way, and that's not very great. And also the music scene has changed so dramatically that, what you discovered and captured on tape and certainly in your photographs, you'll never see the like of that again.
Well, I saw a lot of originals. Tina Turner cannot be compared to anybody. In the '80s, I started seeing people starting to compare things. Like this is like a AC/DC band if they had an Alice Cooper singer. But when I saw Alice, he's not compared to anybody. They never said Alice is like anybody. They said, "Oh my God, you got to see this guy." And Tina Turner was not like anybody that came before her. Beyonce might be like Tina, or she hopes she would be, but Tina was not like anybody. She was an original, and most of the people I saw back then were originals.
Absolutely. And she's not at all like Tina, but she does like her a lot.
Right. But there'll never be somebody who has that kind of energy in that kind of way.
Did you also see the people that I mentioned before? I mean, you kind of came into the scene because of meeting Ike and Tina. Everything changed for you, and we're going to go into that as well. But I mean, prior to that, you had already taken rock photographs. You'd taken pictures of Bob Dylan at the Newport Festival in 1965. So you were already doing all of that.
I was kind of starting to learn. I mean, I went to Newport and I talked to them into giving me a photo pass because I didn't have money for a ticket. And I wanted to go in, and I ended up taking some pretty good pictures, but I had nowhere I had no contacts. I didn't sell those pictures for 6 or 8 years until the '70s when I finally met people. It was when I met Ike and Tina. I had a couple of connections because I was living with this band, and then I met somebody at Atlantic Records, and they had hired me to take pictures of Tommy James and the Shondells, I think. But when I met Ike and Tina, it really opened more doors. Like I said, I met this publicist and he introduced me to Alice and Elton, and things just started happening after that. And also the fact that I had such a good picture of Tina, that picture really stood out as unusual and amazing. And so that.
And did you show that famous picture that we're also going to see today here? Did you show that to some of the other artists as well?
Oh, yeah, all the time. As a photographer, I knew I couldn't talk about pictures. I couldn't say to somebody, "I take great pictures," because what does that mean, And so I had a camera bag where I could put an 8x10 box of pictures in the bag and carry it with me. And whenever I would meet somebody, I would take the box out and I would actually show them pictures. And the Tina Turner picture was on the top until I met John Lennon.
Right. And we're going to certainly talk about John Lennon as well. But I mean, did you also you probably didn't get to meet them. I don't know if you did. You can say those like Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison, and Jimi Hendrix.
No, I once met Jimi Hendrix for a minute, and I showed him the Tina Turner picture, actually. It was the first day I made a big print of the Tina Turner picture, and I was bringing it home from the lab, and I saw Jimi Hendrix walking across Sheridan Square, and I followed him down to a restaurant, and we went in, and I was debating for a few minutes because you don't like to interrupt somebody when they're getting ready to eat. But I went in and I said, I just want to show you this picture. He said, oh, that's a really good picture. I said, I'd like to take your picture. He said, well, we'll meet again. But then he died, so we never did meet again.
Oh,
But
wow. That's remarkable.
I
So you
saw
did get to meet it.
I saw Janice at the Fillmore East the night the Fillmore opened in New York. I had no idea who she was. I had heard there was a band called Big Brother, but I didn't know they had a sister. You know? And I remember seeing her sing. I was like, oh my God, who is this? But I never actually met Janice or took any pictures of her. And same thing with, who was the other one?
Jim Morrison.
Jim Morrison. No, I never saw him, but I heard about him. I never was a fan of his depressing, morbid music. And from what I heard about people around town, he was just a nasty drunk, like a lot of poets. So I had no interest in meeting him. But I didn't know anybody in the 60s. It wasn't until I was in the 70s, like I say, after I met Ike Tina, I started meeting people and meeting people from Cream magazine and Rolling Stone magazine and the New York Rocker. And I worked with a magazine called Rock Scene with Lisa Robinson, Richard Robinson, and that opened a lot of doors for me. But I think we started Rock Scene around 72. So it was, a couple of years before I really got involved in the business.
Yeah, and the 70s and the 80s were certainly your decades, right?
I had a lot of fun, yep.
Well, that's just to put
I
it
got
mild.
really busy. By 73, 74, most of the pictures I sign nowadays are between 73 and 76 or 78.
What did Jimi Hendrix say when he saw your Tina Turner picture?
Oh, he said, that's a great picture. And I said, I'd like to take your picture. And he said, okay, we'll meet again. And that was the whole conversation.
Right. So and you also, I mean, you saw Ike and Tina many times live, and you took a lot of those photographs. There are also some famous photographs that you took at the Waldorf Astoria in 1976, just a couple of months, well, before they split, actually.
Yeah, that was their last show in New York.
I think actually this picture is one of them.
New York, it was kind of a depressing time. I remember the room was sort of small, and it wasn't. I don't know. They were on the way down, obviously. But I remember I brought my dad to that show, and I almost had a date with Ronnie Spector because the day before that show, I met Ronnie Spector at a David Bowie concert. And at the after party, I mentioned that, I was introduced to her, and I mentioned that Ike and Tina were playing the next day, and she said she had never seen them. And I said, oh, I'll take you to the show. And I was really excited. I woke up the next morning going, oh my God, I'm going to go on a date with Ronnie Spector. And she gave me her number, and I called up the number. It was actually the real number. First of all, I didn't even know she was giving me the right number, But I called up, and her mother answered the phone. She lived with her mom back then, and said, Ronnie's going to Jamaica with David Bowie.
Oh,
and I was like,
so plans changed.
Yeah, plans changed. He's a tough act to compete with,
I think that Ronnie Spector knew Tina from the days of recording River Deep Mountain High with Phil Spector.
Maybe, but I don't think she'd ever seen the show.
Right. And before we get into that, because you have a funny story or an interesting story also to talk about Phil Spector, who's not only legendary but very infamous right now, actually. But I mean,
yeah.
When Tina left Ike, there were those years. Did you see her before that middle gap between her working Las Vegas and before the comeback?
I saw her when she came to town with Elton John with the Tommy movie. I have some pictures of the presidents, and then she actually hired me to spend the night photographing her at the premiere of the Tommy movie. And there was a big party in a brand new subway station around the corner. So I was working for her at that week.
But at that time she was still with Ike, actually, and those pictures are from
really
from 75 and at the premiere with Ann-Margret.
Right. I didn't know whether they were still together. I didn't think so.
She left on the 4th of July in 76.
Really? I'm just thinking back because I remember talking to him in 75 about he was telling me that Tina wanted to leave and he didn't understand it. And I was actually breaking up with my wife at the time, and I did understand it. And I was trying to explain to him that women wanted to be independent and make their own decisions. And he was looking at me like I was speaking another language. Like, what are you talking about? Make decisions and do things. I'm taking care of her. What does she have to make a decision about?
Oh, he
You know, it's
said
that kind
that.
of,
Wow.
not quoting him, not quoting him, but it was that kind of attitude. Like he was looking at me like he just totally did not understand why a woman would want to be on her own. And
Yeah, he
but I
probably
remember,
didn't understand. But according to Tina's fashion designer at the time, Christian Holder, that I had on my show, he said that, and he had a lot. He had designed a lot of those dresses that you took pictures of on Tina.
uh,
But he said that Tina had revealed to Ann-Margret, I think during that premiere when they were shooting the film, that that actually she was being well battered in a way because it kind of a little bit slipped out there. So they were part of taking care of her. I mean, when
uh,
she left and went into hiding at that time in '76.
I don't know about those details.
So during those years before her comeback, you also saw her and you took some of the most iconic pictures, I think, ever, really rock and roll pictures at the Ritz in 1981 and with David Bowie and Keith Richards and John McEnroe. And interestingly enough, I've
That was
known those,
'83, but the second show was the big comeback show with
yeah,
David Bowie and the tennis player and everybody.
and those pictures are iconic. I want to tell you something funny because last year, when I was in Paris, I was
Mm.
walking along the Seine, the river, and we stopped in front of the Notre Dame, and there was this stand with pictures, and I bought this picture, and this was in October last year.
It's a popular one.
It's
Yeah,
very
terrible print.
popular. Isn't it amazing? I mean,
Yeah,
you can really tell this is rock and roll history right there. And of course, one of your most iconic pictures. I was thrilled to buy that one. And I guess a lot of your pictures are being sold everywhere around the world, right?
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of bootlegs. You know, it's easy to do, um, but it's not something I can do anything about. It's kind of like it's the price I pay for making something that people want, and some
Exactly.
people steal it, and some people pay for it. You know,
Right. So of course you don't well you don't profit from it. That's for sure. I mean,
right?
sadly, but I mean, my God, those pictures are like you can't even comprehend how famous they are. They're kind of part of people's consciousness when they think about rock
It
and
was an
roll.
exciting night. I remember when Tina started pouring her champagne, and Bowie was afraid she was going to spill it on him. You know,
Oh, he was afraid of that.
he's holding back a little bit because he didn't want to get it spilled all over him. You know?
Hmm. So what was it like for Tina when you saw her when she came back and she changed her life and new music and all that? You also did some great pictures when she was on the Break Every Rule tour in the in the backstage area in her dressing room. I mean, what was that like
Yeah,
to see her
84.
transform?
Yeah, I think that was '84 and was it
That was
'84?
80, that was in 87, but maybe you also did a lot.
'87 at '87 at Jones Beach, but also she was in the Live Aid show, and I took pictures of her there with Mick Jagger in '85.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, you were all over. I mean, what was that like to see her transform in that way and become such a major star? Had you ever expected that?
Um, I don't expect things. I mean, it's not up to me, you know? So it's not something I expected. But yeah, I was very happy for her. I was very happy for her to see her succeed so well. I knew she had been through a lot. By that time, I had heard that she had, you know, the problems with Ike, and I was very, very happy for her to see her succeed on her own. Um, it was great. You know, she was very happy, and I was very happy as her friend to see her, you know, doing so well.
Do you remember the last time that you met Tina or took pictures of
I think when
her?
they played their tour here, they played at Madison Square Garden. Uh, and it's interesting. I have a picture of when she played in New Jersey, which was about 20 years ago. But when she played at the Giant Stadium, or not stadium, it was the arena in New Jersey. Um, I came actually with my ex-wife and my current wife, and we went and met Tina backstage. And I have a picture of all four of us, which was kind of nice because she and my ex-wife were very close. And so it was great when we reconnected, and then I told Tina that, because my ex-wife, actually, I said she's a spiritual leader, so she actually performed the wedding ceremony to marry me and my current wife, Elizabeth.
Did she?
And so my ex-wife actually pronounced us man and wife. So when I said to Tina, we were telling Tina that Nadia is now, a spiritual teacher, and I mentioned, I guess, she actually performed the ceremony, and I pointed. At that point, my wife was sort of still standing by the door because Tina knew me and Nadia, and so we just walked into the restroom. How are you doing? And Elizabeth kind of held back a bit. And so as I said that she married us, I pointed to Elizabeth, and Tina looked at Nadia and looked at Elizabeth and did a 360 spin around, like, say what? And turned completely around, like, what? And I said, and then I introduced Elizabeth, so it was really a fun meeting. And
wow, that's amazing. So she just
did. I remember she played in Albany, I think, a few years earlier, and I brought my son to that show. He was about 10 at that time, but she met Chris when he was like 6 months old at the Waldorf Astoria show. We brought him there when he was a baby.
Yeah, and you have a picture where Tina is sitting with, and your son is on her lap, right?
Yeah, he's about this big.
That's so amazing. So that last time you saw her was when she was on the 24/7 tour in 2000?
I think so, yeah.
Or was it her 50th anniversary tour in 2008? That was when she was in America.
Probably.
Okay.
Whatever the last tour was, yeah.
Yeah, that was in 2008, 2009.
Yeah, after she was in Europe, I didn't see her. When we made the movie, I was very much in touch with Rhonda, back and forth, picking the pictures and selections and so on, stuff like that. But I didn't actually go there. So I didn't see her in Europe.
Right. So you must have had some great memories there, and that's extraordinary. Is there something specifically about Tina that you can just mention that stand out, or memory that was fun, or something that she did that you would like to share here with her fans and her audience?
Well, just that she was just the most basic, basically good person. She had a good sense of humor. She was just so open and friendly.
Mm-hmm. So when you met John Lennon, things really changed for you, and you became very close with John and Yoko Ono, obviously, and that was through meeting Elton John and everybody because of Ike and Tina. And please take us through some of those amazing memories.
Well, not just because meeting Elton John. None of them had a direct relation to my meeting John and Yoko. I met John and Yoko because I was involved in the first book of rock and roll photography, which is called The Photography of Rock. And by then I photographed a number of people, Alice Cooper and Elton John and Ike and Tina, and the Tina pictures in that book. And a few other pictures. I met some people, and the writer who interviewed the photographers for their biography liked me, and he liked my pictures. And he was doing a story about the Elvis Memory Band that John and Yoko were working with in the studio, recording their Sometime in New York City album. They were using the Elvis Memory Band as the studio musicians. And so we went to interview John and Yoko about the Elvis Memory Band. And I knew they were going to be in the studio with them that night, so I asked if I could come along with them. And I got some good pictures of them during the interview, and then I got good pictures of them in the studio, which I gave to the magazine. And I actually went off on the road. That's when I went to, we went, I forget exactly where we were, but I kind of picked this up and said, come to California. And before we knew it, we were literally living in the studio in Bollock Sound in Los Angeles. They had some bedrooms upstairs.
Did you go to those bedrooms? I've heard about Bollock Sound Studios, and it was almost like a castle with walls that would move or something. Can you just talk about that?
Well, okay, it wasn't a castle. It was, a little bunkhouse of solid, concrete block. The walls didn't move, but the back wall, if you came down, there was a secret apartment in the back. and there was no door. The door was that I could call a certain phone number, and that would click a relay, and the back wall would pop open, and there was like an oval shaped opening, like the Nautilus or something, and you step in there, and it was all the most corny place. It was all shag carpeting on the walls and the floor, and he had a big naked picture of himself and some naked women, and he had a couch that he was always saying that the armrest went up in the air like an erection. And I remember a famous story. A record company president came in and looked around at places. And Ike said, "I spent $75,000 decorating this place." And the guy said, "I can't believe you spent $75,000 in Woolworths," because it was just the corniest kind of stuff. But the studio itself had 2 rooms and two recording rooms, Studio A and B. And Ike was in the habit, he would meet people on the road. Some kid would say, "I can make this reverb box," or "I can make this box that does a certain kind of thing." And Ike would give the guy coke and keep him awake and bring him back to LA until he made that box and screwed it into his studio. And so there was always some kid underneath one studio or the other. They're always going from Studio A. Okay, we got to go over to Studio B because somebody's going to wire something into Studio A. And they'd be in there for a day and a half, and then they'd have that kid wire that into Studio B, so they'd go back to Studio A. And they were always moving back and forth because I just kept improving the place over and over. He'd meet people, and whatever they could do, he'd bring them back to LA and do it. That's how he made the secret door. He had some kid who said, "I can put a relay on a phone," and he said, "Okay, do it." And nobody had the phone number except Ike and Rhonda. So they were the only 2 people who could open that door. And if Ike wanted somebody to go in and get something from the apartment, he could call up from Paris and open the door for them, which was really kind of funny. And there was top security. I remember there was something like after 1 o'clock in the morning, between 1 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the morning, nobody could open the doors. The doors were solid steel, like a bunker. I mean, the guy was on coke. He was totally paranoid. Everybody in there was totally paranoid. So at like 1 in the morning, they would lock the door. Nobody goes in or out. But as I said, I had kind of a unique relationship with Ike. So I could come back at 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, and just knock on the door, wave at the video, and they would open the door for me. But nobody else had that kind of privilege. So I never understood why I had that kind of relationship, but I did. And,
why do you think that was, Bob? It's very interesting, though.
We just connected. I don't know. We just connected on a basic human level. We liked each other. We looked directly into each other's eyes. When Ike looks into your eyes, he sees your soul from the top of your head to the tip of your toes. But if you're open for that and you want to connect with somebody on that level, he was good for that. And I'm open for that. I like to connect with people. I'm not afraid of that.
Did you also experience Ike calling Tina in the middle of the night, waking her up and telling her to go to the studio to record something?
No, I don't remember anything like that. I'm sure it could have happened because Ike was awake all the time, and when he worked, he wanted something now. He wanted what he wanted when he wanted it. And especially if you're on coke, you want it now.
Did he also invite you to go on such a coke journey there? I guess you were involved in a lot of that.
Everybody in the studio was imbibing. That's how we stayed awake and continued to, the party.
And did you were you able to do that? Because you look great for somebody who's close to 80. I mean, that's kind of amazing. And the life that you led with all of these people, I mean, did you always go with all of them? I mean, you went with the Sex Pistols and the Ramones and I don't know who. Let's talk about it. But I mean,
I've had a lot of fun in my life. For some reason, I have a strong constitution. I have done a lot of things I would not recommend to other people. Yoko once said that I lived a very exciting life, but next time I'd rather read about it in a book. And I kind of feel that way. I did a lot of things that were dangerous, and I don't recommend it. I did a lot of things that I certainly wouldn't do nowadays.
And like what, Bob? Do you want to reveal something for us?
Well, I mean, I used to drink pretty heavily. I hardly drink at all now. Basically, I don't drink. I mean, a lot of that lifestyle that seemed to make sense at the time that doesn't make sense now,
Right.
Staying awake for 2 weeks. I mean, why, would I take that much coke and stay awake that long? But because of the situation I was in, it made sense at the time. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed it at the time, and I had no problem with it. And yeah, I don't know how come I'm still alive, but I am.
That's amazing. You live to tell. But I mean, so you saw Tina, of course, when she went solo. But how about Ike? When was the last time you saw him?
Oh, actually, I saw him a couple of times too. It was quite exciting. I was in Paris and I heard a record on the radio that sounded like Ike's kind of sound, that kind of plinkety plink, high pitched guitar picking, and it sounded kind of like him. And I was in a taxi cab, me and my wife, and the editor of a big French newspaper, rock and roll paper, and it's got Philippe. And and I don't speak any French, but when the song ended, I heard the DJ mention Ike Turner, and I hit Philippe. I said, Philippe, listen to what he's saying. What's he saying? What's he saying? And Philippe said, oh, Ike Turner's in town. He's going to play tonight at the Meridian Hotel. And because Meridian was a big jazz club that was in the bottom of a hotel. And I said, well, he's at and I knew about that place. Actually, I had seen Screaming Jay Hawkins play at the Meridian a couple of years earlier. It was a great jazz rock club. And so I said to Philippe, I said, call up the hotel. If he's playing there, they probably gave him a free room. So call the hotel and ask for Ike. And then give me the phone. And so he calls, asks for Ike's room, gives me the phone. Ike's girlfriend at the time, whatever, answered the phone. I said, tell Ike it's Bob Gruen. Ike got on the phone. I said, I'm here in Paris. We want to come to the show. He said, oh, great. Come on down tonight. And I sometimes do funny things. I get a little carried away. So I had Philippe and a producer. We had Mark. We had another producer, my friend Bruno. We had this great rock and roll kid, Nicola, and his girlfriend, and me and my wife. We had about 8 people. And the Meridian is one of these fancy jazz clubs where it's like $60 or $80 cover per person just to walk in. And so we're at the desk with the maitre d' discussing whether or not Ike has put me and my 8 friends on the list. Because I said to Ike, I'll bring a couple of friends. He says, whatever you want, I'll put you on the list. So we're discussing this with the maitre d', and he's not having like 8 people free, And I remember turning to Nicola and saying, Nicola, quick, tell him, where I'm from New York and I'm Ike's friend. He said, no, you talk to him in English, and he'll believe it more. And I said, all right. And just then Nicola said, isn't that Ike? And Ike was walking into the club just then. And I waved, and this is the kind of timing that's why my book is called Right Place, Right Time, because I have that kind of timing that just as we're having this discussion with the maitre d', Ike shows up. And I waved and I said, hey, Ike, we're trying to get in. He goes, okay. And he comes to the maitre d'. He says, all these guys are my friends. Let them all in. And we got a nice table in front with all 8 of us. And he did a great show. And it was kind of like, he had a girl that was doing some singing. And I don't think he had dancers like I guess, but he had a woman singer. And it wasn't close to Tina. I mean, nobody's close to Tina, but it was kind of like Ike was the good part of that show. He was on the piano and he was playing blues. And he was great. I mean, he was very much Ike, but the singer was nowhere near Tina. And
you can't top that one. You can't emulate Tina, and even those who tried, they never can.
There was a similar show. I think the first time my wife met him was when he played here in New York at Tramps Club, and he had a big gold scorpion around his neck, and he had like 2-tone shit. My wife was like blown away with his style. Like Ike had fantastic style, but a very unique style. Like by that time, he was in the 90s, I guess it was, or 2000s when we saw him, and he was a bit more conservative. When I was with them in the early 70s, they were wearing purple tights with hot pants and stuff like that. So the first time I went out there, when Ike took me out there for a week, after 3 or 4 days of not sleeping and just being in the same T-shirt the whole time, they started to notice that I hadn't changed my clothes, you know what I mean? And Ike said, like, oh, yeah, if you want to change your clothes, go in my closet. Take anything you want. Wear anything you want. And I walked into the closet, and it's all pink and purple and, a little too sparkly. Hot pants is not my style. It was nothing in the closet that I could put on. And I took my T-shirt off. I washed it in the sink, and I hung it up in the LA sun. It dries in 10 minutes, So I just did that. I was like, I couldn't wear Ike's clothes. One time he actually sent me, we were in New York and I had booked a show for the Beacon. I had helped him out and he wanted to do something for me. He said, we were in that hotel on 42nd Street by Grand Central Station, and down on 42nd, there was a big store that sold fur coats. Like all the pimps used to buy the fur coats there. And Ike sent me down to the store. He said, pick out anything you want, whatever it is, like $10,000, $15,000. I couldn't find a single one like these kind of pimp coats that I felt comfortable in. Like, I'm just not a fur coat kind of guy.
You were
Uh,
way too rock and roll and not like that, huh?
yeah, no, I couldn't I couldn't dress like a 125th Street guy.
Well, actually, Ike was also, he also, at that time when you met him, 1971, he wore that famous or infamous flat short wig as well, right?
I don't think I was with him during the wig period. I think that might have been just before we met, because you can see in my pictures he's not wearing it. So I think I met him just after that.
All right, and obviously the picture you took that went on when that was the cover of their Nuff Said album. That was Tina with this cap on. She looked unusual and not wearing a wig. I mean, that was kind
Right.
of
Well, she was
interesting.
just out shopping for the kids, so she would just put her hair, just put a cap on and kind of cover. She didn't have much natural hair because she always had the wig on, so she kept her own hair kind of short. But yeah, when she'd go out, she'd just wear a cap or something like that.
And did you see her without her wig? I mean, I know she was wearing a cap in that
Yeah.
picture, but did you see her without the cap?
Well, that's when I knew that we were actually friends and that they trusted me because, yes, I was in the dressing room with her when she didn't have her wigs on, and Aunt Thomas would be combing the wigs, getting ready for the show. And Tina would trust that I wasn't taking any pictures of her or trying to expose her like that. And that's when I knew, like, I was really a trusted friend that I could go in the dressing room without the wig. That was a big deal, actually.
Yeah, that's amazing because that was like her trademark look, and you were a
Yeah,
photographer, but naturally you became a friend. What did she look like without her wig?
she looked like Tina with short hair, like anybody else. I mean, she didn't look different. She just didn't have a wig on.
So the last time you saw Ike, it was Ike, and he was the center stage. I was
Yeah.
fortunate enough also to see him on his last tour in 2007, not long
I
before he
actually
died.
saw him. What year was it? Around 20 years ago, I guess. Beginning of the 2000s, somewhere in there. What year? Around 2005, I think. Um,
And he
or
also he won a
I
Grammy,
think,
which was kind of amazing for him, wasn't it? In the last
yes.
year as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, on a solo album. Yeah. But I saw him when he was living outside of San Diego. And I had, he was actually outside of La Jolla, and I had an exhibit in La Jolla in a gallery. And I called him up and told him I was down there. And he was excited about coming, but his girlfriend didn't seem to be nearly as interested. And she was going to take the address and tell him to come and stuff. But they didn't come. But we went to visit him. I actually brought my wife and my son, so they got to meet him at home. And he was playing the organ at one point and got so excited he almost knocked some stuff off him. I remember my son trying to grab the glass before it fell off the organ. But yeah, he was playing music for us, and then he showed us. He had a new car. He had a brand new, I think, Mercedes or something, and it didn't have a key. It had a code. And, press the code, and it would unlock the car. And Ike bought the car and went out to dinner, and he came out after dinner and forgot the code. But there was an OnStar kind of thing where you could call up and they would open your car for you. But he said he was Ike Turner, and the thing was that the dealer had sold him the car and then closed the dealership, and he was going to fax the papers in the morning. So when I did call the OnStar, they didn't have the papers yet. They didn't know that he had really bought it, and since he already had a bad reputation by that point, they literally locked his car down. He had to take a taxi home. He was pissed off.
Oh my God.
But I remember him saying that the car, since it didn't have to have a key, he could start the car and then let somebody take it to go run an errand, like buy cigarettes or drop something off, pick something up, because they couldn't steal the car because they could never turn it off. Because if they ever turned it off, they couldn't turn it back on because he had the key. Like he could turn the car on, and send somebody off with it, but only he could start it because he kept the key. The fob, the key fob.
Wow.
I remember thinking that was a cute trick that he could send somebody in his car and they had to bring it back because they couldn't start it if they kept it.
That's very unusual, huh? But that also shows something about people being prejudiced or not, not wanting to.
Yeah, totally, totally. I had a rough time. People, after he got the bad reputation, and he wasn't the only guy who took coke and hurt people.
No.
So
What would you like people who are listening to this to know about Ike Turner from your point of view?
how generous he was, how open he was to helping people. I mean, that's a side of people a side of Ike that has not been mentioned and hasn't been talked about. But like I said, I went to his funeral, and it was in a big one of those kind of churches where they have television preachers, and it was like literally more than 1,000 people at Ike's funeral, because they were all people that he had helped. And that's something that people don't know about Ike. And I don't excuse him hitting anybody. I mean, if that happened, that's wrong. But like I say, I didn't see it. And all I saw was how generous Ike was to me and a lot of people.
Well, there is this crazy moment in the beginning of your film On the Road with Ike and Tina, a color film, actually. And I think you went into color video as well.
Right.
Also, when they're in this car and Tina is behaving like really strange, like very over the top, a little bit like a mad woman, saying to Ike, like alluding to you are controlling, like saying something like,
Yeah,
you never
it's a
want to
very
go with me when I want to go. I don't want to
right.
be forced.
It's a very telling piece of film. And what it was we were filming for a couple of weeks. Ike took us on the road, and then I just got an urge to come home to New York for 2 days and finish my taxes. And in fact, it was in those 2 days that I met John and Yoko. So it was very important that I came home for those 2 days. But in those 2 days I was home, I spent some time with my ex-wife looking at the footage that we had made. And he said that he really liked the footage that we were making, but he wanted better quality. He wanted it to be in color. And so I flew out there. I came home like Tuesday. I got home Wednesday morning. I was awake Wednesday night. I met John and Yoko on Thursday, and I flew back out there Thursday night, and I got there late at night. And Ike said he wanted me to rent a whole color camera and start filming in color. And I knew nothing about filming, motion picture film. And except that I read that Godard and Penbacker and those kind of filmmakers, they used a French camera called an Eclair. It's a $50,000 camera. And Ike sent me off to the camera rental place. And I told him I wanted an Eclair and I wanted a Nagra. The only thing I knew about it was the name. Like the Nagra was the best tape recorder made that movie people use. So I got the equipment, and I got a little book. It's a little brown book called the Cinematographer's Handbook. And I put that in my back pocket. And everything I learned about filming was from osmosis, from that book in my pocket, because I knew nothing. And I get back to the studio. It's Friday afternoon. Also, it's Friday morning. We get to the store, and they said, "Oh, you need a letter of credit to take out $80,000 worth of stuff." And it was Good Friday, and the bank was closing early. And Rhonda called the bank and made them make a letter for me. And I ran to the bank, and I ran back to the MPCS place, and I got all the equipment. I come back, I got these boxes of all this equipment, and we were going to San Francisco for a show that night. And I took one look at the boxes, and he said, "Well, we're flying up there on a small plane. That won't fit on the plane." And he throws me these keys. He says, "Take Tina's Jaguar." And I said, "Okay." And I loaded all the camera equipment into the car, and he said, "Oh, take this kid." There was a kid who was like some famous blues player's grandson or something. He was like this 17-year-old kid who had been awake for a couple of days with Ike. And Ike said, "Yeah, meet us in San Francisco for the second show." And I had no idea how far. I thought it was like New York and Philadelphia, like an hour and a half. I didn't know that San Francisco was literally 450 miles away. And it's not an hour and a half. And anyway, we made it. And the next day, I unpacked all the equipment, took some of the Ikettes. We went down to the Fisherman's Wharf, and I figured I'd try to see how this camera worked. And we took the camera out of the car, and lucky for me, 3 or 4 kids were on the sidewalk, and they came over and said, "Oh, are you making a film? We're film students." And I said, "Oh, you're film students?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, do you know how to turn this camera on?" I literally did not know where the on switch was. I figured out how to load the film. I opened the side. I managed to get some film in there, but I didn't know how to turn it on. So these kids showed me that, and I said to them, "Do you like rock and roll?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "You want to come see Ike Tina Turner tonight?" And literally everything I know about filming, I learned from those 3 kids.
Right time, right place again, huh, Bob?
Yeah. They popped out just when I needed them.
Wow. So you took Tina's Jaguar that actually was given to her by Sammy
No,
Davis
not that
Jr.
one. I don't think it was that one. I think she had a car. I don't think it was the one from Sammy Davis, but
Okay, right.
I think it was one that she had before that. It was a
So you
really
had to
nice.
drive it way back to Los Angeles again.
Yeah, that was the good part because I drove up there through the night trying to get to the show, and I could give me some coke. I hadn't slept in days, and I'm driving 80 miles an hour, hoping I don't get arrested. The kid couldn't drive. He told me he could drive it. As soon as he got behind the wheel, the car was like all over him. We were so lucky he didn't crash. So I made him get off at the first exit, and then I took over. And he was just talking away. So I turned on the heat, and I pointed all the heat vents at him, and I made him go to sleep. And then I just drove through the night like I'm on a mission, and I got there. And then the good part was after a couple of days, I got to drive down the coast with my wife in the Jaguar. But it was totally fogged in. The beautiful views of the coastline with the ocean and everything. Complete fog. I couldn't see 10 feet in front of the car. And they have these roads that go right by the edge of the ocean. And I couldn't see where the edge of the road was. So I'm literally going like 5 feet at a time, trying to not fall off the cliff in this car. And we're getting back and we stayed overnight, I think, in Big Sur or something. And then all of a sudden, I'm in the car and a phone rings. And in those days, they didn't have phones, that would ring somewhere else. And I'd never seen a car. I'm looking around, and there's like the box in between the seats. And I lift it up, and there's a phone in there, a telephone. And it's ringing. And I answered. It's Ron.
In the car, even at that time, in this 1971, 72.
Yeah, 1972 in the spring. It was a radio phone. I'm telling you, Ike was up on every modern invention. There was a radio phone in the car. So I answered the phone, and Rhonda goes, "Where are you? Tina wants her car back." And I'm like, "I don't know where I am. I'm stuck in the fog somewhere up here. We're driving back." Yeah, that was embarrassing because Tina wanted to go somewhere. We had the car, and it's actually in the video. And at one point, when she's in the house, she's telling somebody that you have to pull the choke out, that it's really hard to start the Jaguar. That Jaguars are touchy cars. They look great, but they're really touchy to drive. But it's in the video where she's telling somebody you have to pull the choke all the way out and start it up and stuff. She's
wow, I have to see that again
when she's making a liver or something, when she's cooking at home.
Yeah, now that's so interesting. And there were also a story about you having been to their show or something in very early on, and another incident with being at the right time in the right place. And then you went in to get some food in a diner, and they were there.
Oh, the first time I met them, we met him. I mean, I took pictures at the Honkamonga Club, and then we saw him in New Jersey, and that's when I said hello to Ike. And then the next day or two, they played at the Newport Jazz Festival, and we drove up there to see them. And at that point, I just had this brief conversation. I didn't think of going backstage or trying to meet him again or anything. He said meet him in New York on Monday, and this was Saturday. So we saw great shows. I remember Roland Kirk opened for them, and Roland Kirk is one of my favorite jazz people. He's like a rock and roll saxophone player. Amazing guy, blind guy who plays 3 saxophones at once. Roland Kirk, a name you should definitely know. And then Ike Tina, and then we were driving home, back home. When you're young, you can do that, drive 4 or 5 hours, have a whole afternoon, and then drive back another 4 or 5 hours. So I was driving as usual. My friends in the car fell asleep, and I pulled into the first, stop on the highway to get some coffee. And I pulled in, and I step out of my car, and as I step out, 2 limousines pulled in next to me. And I just stood there, kind of surprised, and Ike and Tina and the band step out of the limos. And that's what I mean about right place, right time. Because Ike saw me and goes, "Hey, didn't I see you last night?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Oh, come on in and have breakfast with us," And he bought me breakfast, and I sat with the band and talked to them. That's when I started to meet the group. And I came back out. My friends were still sleeping in the car, and I started driving away. I said, "You won't believe what just happened." Like, "Why didn't you wake us up?" I said, "Well, he only invited me. He didn't invite all of you."
Wow, that was so amazing, though, that happens. Such a coincidence, if you can call it that.
I have a lot of coincidences in my life. I don't question them.
Yeah, so they just went in there for some food there, and Tina was there as well?
Oh, yeah, the whole band.
So so I mean that was in the early days, and very quickly, obviously, you formed this friendship, and then what about the iCats? You see them a lot in the film as well. Tell if you have a
Esther,
fun story about.
Jean.
Uh,
The diecast when I was there were Esther, Edna, and Jean. I mean, there's different. I guess there's one I know now. Oh, I forget her name. Oh, I'm going blank. Um, she wrote the song "Let's All Get Stoned." She was an iCat. The Ray Charles hit "Let's All Get Stoned."
Claudia Linnea.
No, not Claudia Lanier. 1 second. I think I
That
can
was
find.
Judy Cheeks also.
Uh,
Certainly Esther and Edna. That was Lejeune later on.
I know.
And then there was one called Vera Hamilton.
Joe Armstead.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, Joe Armstead. She's still around New York. She's great. And she wrote that big hit. A good friend of mine, actually, who's a short Jewish girl, dreamed of being an iCat, met Ike one day, had her moment, and told Ike she wanted to be an iCat. He looked at her and said, "You the wrong size." You know?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. But what was Esther like, and Lejeune, Edna,
Oh,
and
she was quite lively. She was the liveliest of the three. Jean was kind of a little bit drawn, but very friendly and always kind of giggling and having fun. Um, and Edna, again, more like Jean, but Esther was quite outgoing.
that's what we hear. So did John Lennon know Tina Turner?
Knew of her, yeah, but I don't think he knew. I don't think John met Tina. I don't remember that happening. I mean, he knew. He saw my picture. He knew I was working with him, but I don't think he went to see them. Not that I know.
Right. So what was it like getting to know John and Yoko? Because I mean, Ike and Tina is a famous couple, but John and Yoko is like, I mean,
A little
incredible.
more famous, yeah. It was pretty incredible, but again, they're down to earth, real people, and that's the kind of people I connect with. And I can't tell you how I became friends with them. They lived around the corner from me. It was very convenient. Um, we had a similar sense of humor. We just got along together, they liked my pictures, so it was convenient to have somebody that they liked around taking pictures because they liked their life documented. By the time I met them, they were one of probably the most famous couple in the world, and they knew that there was a lot of interest in them, and they appreciated that their life was being documented. Sometimes they had filmmakers, covering certain events that they did. And so the fact that they liked me and we got along together, because also at the time when I met them, there was a lot of partying. We were in the recording studio at the record plant with the Elvis memory. Pretty soon we were drinking a lot of tequila every night. And it was just a big party time. And somehow I was the one who lasted after the drinking and remained friends with both of them when they separated for a while. And then when they came back together, and then even after John died, I stayed good friends with Yoko. Did quite a lot of things when she was active in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, I know that you stayed close with Yoko for a long time, but you
Yeah.
became like really close with both of them. You've taken the most incredible pictures of John and Yoko privately in bed with their son Sean when he was born, and also up to his death, basically. I mean, you were really invited well, into their lives and being part of their lives
Well,
a
that's the
bit,
thing.
right?
Once you become actual friends with somebody, it's easier to spend more time together because you like being together. And being in those situations, I could take more intimate photos because once we developed some trust, they would let me, because they would know that I wasn't going to take a picture that would expose or embarrass them. That I was more interested in keeping the relationship and, and not jeopardizing the friendship. So I would take pictures and right at the beginning when they told me they wanted me to be around, and Yoko told me that as long as I always showed them the pictures and used pictures that they liked, and we would have a good relationship. And some photographers say I don't want to be censored or have that kind of attitude. I prefer to show the pictures to the artist and use pictures they like because I want them to like what I'm doing. I want them to hire me again. I don't consider that censorship. I consider that working with the artist. And that's what I always do is I try to work with the artist, not the lawyer or the record company or the publicist, but with the artists themselves so that they get what they like, and then they'll hire me again. And on some occasions, I become friends with the people I work with. I've photographed thousands of people. I've become friends with probably hundreds of them, actually, because I'm a friendly guy. But it doesn't happen automatically. I mean, a lot of times I meet somebody for 2 minutes, take a picture, and that's that, But other times, ever since I was in school, I was always drawn to the artistic kind of people, to the musicians, to the actors, the artists, painters. I was just always more involved with those kind of people.
But I mean, you weren't just involved with some, people that that weren't really famous and didn't amount to much. I mean, they were like the biggest
stars that aren't famous. You just don't know about them.
Of course, and naturally you would. But I mean, but when we see your history and know your history, and there was a documentary about you that I watched as well, right, which was so interesting. And Yoko was interviewed, and Alice Cooper, and Iggy Pop, and lots of people who talked about how you were like a fly on the wall, that you never interrupted, you were integrated, you were part of the party scene, and you took pictures of people while everything was happening. So you were documenting rock and roll in a way without being intrusive, without them even noticing what was going on. And that time they didn't have the internet, and they didn't have the cell phone to do all these pictures. So, and people couldn't just watch videos. So your pictures became like a manifestation of that era and the feeling, right?
Well, before the internet, the pictures were news. I mean, things took a little longer. We take a picture, you have to develop it, you have to make some prints, you have to send it to a magazine, they'd have to send it to a printer. By the time I got on the stands, it was a month later, but it was still news because nobody knew about it. There was no way to find out. Nowadays, a guy starts singing, you take a couple of pictures, push a couple of buttons, and you have pictures around the world before the first song is over. It's a whole different time frame than the way I used to work. But it was news to people, the kind of things that we were doing. And in those days, you needed a photographer to take a picture because a camera was complicated. You had settings of f-stops and focus and speeds and the speed of the film and all these things that, were technical, that the camera now, the phone just automatically does all of those things. You push the button, you take a picture. Back then, you had to set all kinds of settings. You had to carry a lot of heavy equipment. You had to carry film and get it developed. There's a whole process. So back then, you needed somebody who knew the photographic techniques. Nowadays, I mean, there was a point when my 8-year-old granddaughter took a picture. My son's a singer-songwriter, and he wanted me to take a picture for his album cover. And then my granddaughter beat me to it. And I couldn't complain about it because she took a picture that she had planned, and she took the picture on purpose and took a dozen pictures until she got it right. So she had actually spent time photographing and doing but the technology of photography was so easy that it made it easy for her to do that. She didn't have to learn how to make a good photo in the first place.
So your granddaughter is like stepping into your footsteps in a way. She's a photographer.
Well, no, she's not doing photography. She's actually a singer-songwriter herself. But but the point is that you don't have to learn the technology. You can just concentrate on composition in the moment, what you want to capture. But we used to have to know a lot of technical aspects that made it harder to take a picture.
So what was John and Yoko like? What was it like being with them as people?
Funny. John was very funny. It was always fun to be with them. And with Yoko's influence, they like to eat well. So I loved to come around when it was lunch or dinner time or something, because they always ate well. And like I say, John turned almost every sentence into a joke. He would twist the words into a pun. And so whenever you were with John and Yoko, you were constantly laughing. I mean, I was anyway. He was a very funny guy, and he liked to entertain. It was really fun to be with him. And I always felt, he was very perceptive, and I always felt that I would learn something and eat well and have a lot of laughs. So I always looked forward to seeing him.
Would you consider them to be the people that you were closest to, of people of that level, so to speak?
Oh, on a super famous level, probably, but I mean, it depends on what level you're talking about. I hung out a lot with the Clash. Joe Strummer became a particularly close friend. The New York Dolls were family to me, particularly David and Syl, Johnny. There's some people. I mean, and nowadays I hang out, spend time with Green Day.
Yes, you did a lot with
Before
Green
the
Day.
pandemic changed things. I don't hang out with too many people nowadays. But before the pandemic, I used to I went to Europe with Green Day, spent a lot of time with them.
Yeah, right. So how did John Lennon's tragic death, affect you? Because did you ever experience something weird with people surrounding John and Yoko?
We never felt any threat being with John and Yoko. We always knew he's a public figure. He always had a vague feeling that something might happen somewhere.
Did he?
But it never. And we were more nervous actually in the early 70s. In 72, 73, the FBI was following John because Richard Nixon, the president, wanted John thrown out of the country because he was afraid that John was going to organize anti-war protests and that would harm his presidency, his re-election campaign. And so they started a campaign to try to throw John and Yoko out of the country. And so there were FBI agents trailing not only John and Yoko, but me and some of the elephants noticed odd things, people were following us and stuff. So that was a little weird. But we didn't know for sure at the time. It was just a little weird. Like, do you think somebody's following us? And, they had an expression back then, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean you're not being followed.
Right.
We were actually paranoid, but yes, we actually were being followed. We found out later they got all the transcripts from the FBI.
Yeah, because people did know that the FBI and maybe even the CIA was following him. But I mean, some researchers have suggested that this killer, Mark David Chapman, could maybe have been some kind of MK Ultra mind controlled patsy that
there's a lot of conspiracy theories in the world. None of them will bring him back. Doesn't matter.
What do you think, having been this close to him?
I think that he was shot and he's dead. I don't really know why. Okay, I don't know why, and I don't speculate on why. It was the worst thing that ever happened as far as any friend of mine. There was one other friend of mine that was murdered, but it wasn't because of who she was. It was a theft kind of murder. But when somebody's murdered like that, it's so different from if they die from a disease or from an accident. It's just the most horrible thing because it's so unnecessary. It's so preventable. And it really threw me because it was just the most senseless thing that could possibly happen. And yet it happened. And it really threw my confidence in the world and in other people because it just, everything I've been taught could be wrong. Everything that, was supposed to be right could be wrong because it was like the wrongest thing that could possibly happen. And yet it did happen. And it really threw me for a long time. And of course, for a long time, because a lot of times I would go to the studio and I would drive them home after the session. And that night I didn't. And in fact, we had talked about it earlier and even joked about it. And I said, I'll come by the studio. And John was going to give me a copy of the album. And he said, well, I'll leave it at the desk in the Dakota in case you don't come to the studio. And I said, oh, but I'll get there. He said, oh, just in case, because if I did, I would drive them home and I would get it when I got to the Dakota. But if I didn't go to the studio, I could pick it up anyway, was his point, because I was very iffy in those days. Because I didn't have to go. It was very funny during the Double Fantasy that I had permission to go in the studio and nobody else did. But for whatever reasons, John and Yoko liked talking to me during the breaks. And the president, David Geffen, who ended up signing him, wasn't allowed in the studio. Nobody was allowed in except the 3 or 4 people that were working with him and me. And
Like
I
with
didn't.
Ike at Bollock Sound, he also allowed you to come in
Yeah,
when nobody else could.
but just because I could go didn't mean I did. Because it didn't. You had no thought that it was going to end. I had no thought that he was going to die.
So you
Um,
were with him on the day of his death.
no, 2 days before. Because that's the thing. The day he died, I didn't go to the studio, and so I didn't drive him home that day. So for many, a couple of years, I was thinking like I could have, should have, could have, would have. What if I had gone and I had driven him home and things could have been different, or maybe I gotta at least get him to the hospital faster or something. But then I realized life is what it is, and maybe one day we were walking down the street and I said, "Hey, look at that," and we didn't get run over. How would you know that you didn't get run over? I
Right.
mean, how would you know that some little thing I said one night prevented something else? Because time is weird. You don't know what's going to happen. So after I realized that you can't prevent or change time like that. But yeah, it really threw me because it was just so stupid and wrong, and yet it really happened, and it was so real, and he was really dead, and that was I didn't function for about a year after that. I was really thrown. It took me a while to come back. I had a lot of difficulty taking the world seriously again.
Wow, that's very understandable, obviously. Did John ever talk to you about the Beatles and that time and the breakup
Not
and
a
all
lot,
that?
except I did mention that last night. The last night I saw him, there was a glitch in the tape, and we actually sat on the floor and talked for a couple of hours. And he was very upbeat. He was very happy that the new record was going up the charts. He was going to have a hit. He was planning to do a world tour. I think that's what the world really lost, because he had really kind of grounded himself, raising Sean. He had learned a lot. Everything that people love about John Lennon, he did when he was stoned and drunk in the early, in the 60s and 70s. But after raising Sean, he was sober. He was an adult. He was 40 years old. He was talking about, taking responsibility for his family. He was talking about taking responsibility for, drugs and alcohol and reducing their influence in his life. And just, caring more about life in a sober way. And he was going to bring that message to the world. He was planning to make some videos to promote the album, and then to get a band together. And by April, he said we were going to be going out on a world tour. And I went home that night with my head in the clouds, thinking I was going to go around the world with John and Yoko. And 2 days later, I was developing the pictures I had taken that night, and I heard that he was shot. And the whole thing fell apart. But the world really lost a lot, because there's two books that two interviews John did just before he died. And one is a Playboy interview with David Sheff, and the other one was a BBC interview with Andy Peebles. And both of those interviews are available as books. And if anybody wants to know about John Lennon and what he thought, they should get one of those two books, because he gave great interviews about his thinking and his process and his ideas at the time of 1980, that he had processed everything he had learned, and he put it all out in those two interviews and in the records, the Double Fantasy and the Starting Over, and those two records that he made. But the interviews are particularly revealing in his discussions about responsibility and awareness and awakeness, and just common sense about health and diet. He talked a lot about that. He started a macrobiotic diet. He started eating very healthy while he was raising Sean, and he just had so much better ideas when he got killed. He was about to spread them around the world, and it's very difficult when a personal friend dies and it's world news, and you have to deal with it publicly. I didn't sleep for a week. Everybody in the world was calling up looking for pictures. And it was a very difficult time. And Yoko, was like thrown into a state of shock, but she was a tower of strength and a support for all of me and the other close friends. And she said at one point that, when the guy carrying the flag falls, somebody else has to pick up the flag and keep going. And John Lennon was carrying a pretty big flag, so it's taken a lot of people to pick it up and keep going. But that's what people have to do. You can't stop just because he passed. The ideas of peace and communication that they talked about must be carried on because it's the only sensible way forward. And to see this world today in such chaos, I wish I could have John Lennon's voice in the chaos, because his voice was so clear, and he's such a clear way of saying what everybody was thinking. He once said to me that there was a company wanted him to do some kind of commercial, and he said I couldn't tell people what kind of toothpaste to use; they'd laugh at me. He said I only have an ability to tell people what they're already thinking, to sum up in a few words what they're already thinking, and that's why a phrase like "all we're saying is give peace a chance." It sounds so simple, but nobody used those words before that. And when he said, imagine all the people living life in peace, everybody can say that now, but nobody said it that way before. But everybody thought that. So he had a way of taking everybody's thoughts and putting them into a few words that everybody can then express their ideas. This wasn't his idea. It's their own idea, but he knew how to express it.
And they couldn't be more important even today. It's almost like the world
Absolutely.
hasn't learned anything. It's
No.
nothing has really changed. It's like his words and his work is as important today as it was back then, huh?
I think so. I think so.
So some of the other, I mean, these amazing people, there are really a lot that you have worked with. I mean, you took some really other iconic shots as well, also with Led Zeppelin in front of their plane. That picture is also really iconic. How did that even come about?
Well, like I said, I worked with Rock Scene Magazine with Lisa Robinson, and one day she called me and said, "You want to come to Pittsburgh with Led Zeppelin?" And I said, "How are we going to get there?" And she said, "They have their own plane." And I said, "All right, I can do that." And that was literally the day I met them. I didn't really know who they were. I was busy with Kiss and Alice Cooper in those days. And I'm not really into the kind of music that Led Zeppelin plays, that, I mean, I'm a Chuck Berry kind of guy, 3 minutes and you tell a story. They went on and on forever. And the drummer would play forever. So I didn't really know much about them when I met them. But the first day we went out to the airport, and as we were getting on the plane, I said, "Hey, let me get a picture of the band with the plane." And the thing is, we were right close to the plane. So what I like about that picture is the plane is so big, it doesn't fit in the picture. It's this gigantic thing behind them. I have another picture because that they didn't own that plane. That plane was known as the Enterprise Starship, and a band would rent it for a month, and they put your name on it. I have a picture of Elton John with the same plane, and Rolling Stones rented it. Alice rented it at one point. And the picture of Elton John, he's standing on the tarmac, and the plane is in the distance behind him. It looks like a little toy. But with Led Zeppelin, it looks like this monstrous thing. It's too big. It doesn't even fit in the picture. So yeah, that picture shows the excess. They don't even have their shirts buttoned, and they own their own plane. It was like the epitome of rock and roll lifestyle. So, but that just, like I say, came about the moment that we showed up at the plane. It was just a minute. Nowadays, you have to get corporate permission from 3 lawyers and 6 publicists to be able to even meet a band. Back then, it was like, okay, stand by the plane, click, click, click. I took like 7 shots. It was the end of the roll. They didn't really give me time to change the roll and take more pictures, so we were done. Turned out I had one of the iconic moments of the 70s that really sums up the excess that was the 70s.
Okay, so we've kind of been doing 2 hours here, and it's been absolutely amazing to hear all of your stories here. And I know that we have so much more that we could talk about, and there are so many stories that you could tell. And it would be wonderful to have you on the show again at some point. I would love to do that. But here in our final thoughts, remaining moments here, you have 2 books. You actually have more, but you certainly have a book called Rock Scene, Rock, Seen, Rock Scene. And you also have another book that we spoke about several times, Right Place, Right Time, The Life of a Rock and Roll Photographer, Bob Gruen. And of course, that DVD that I've shown a few times, with Ike and Tina Turner. And if it's not available for purchase, now people can find it online. And they really should see that because it's priceless. It's really very precious footage. And on behalf of any Tina fan and all of the Tina fans I know, we want to thank you very, very much for having done this. It's it's a priceless gem. So I want to thank you so much, Bob, for being on my show today, and I'd love to have you back at some point.
That's what I say. My book, Right Place, Right Time, it's out as a paperback. It's also out as an audiobook by me. I read the whole book in my words, so if somebody wants to hear my story by me, Right Place, Right Time. As an audiobook, is pretty cheap. I think it's only a few bucks. So,
and also the On the Road DVD with Ike
videotape
Tina,
is streaming on the Night Flight channel online. I also have my New York Dolls videos that are also on Night Flight. I made 2 videos of the New York Dolls, similar to the Ike and Tina. We were on the road traveling with them backstage on the planes everywhere. And yes, but I have a whole bunch of books out, but all my stories are in Right Place, Right Time. And like I said, there's a good audio book that they can hear me telling the stories.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
It's been great to meet you, and yes, we can talk again sometime. So
I want to thank you very much for being on my show.
all right, well, thank you. Hope to see you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, take care. All
Take
right,
care.
take care. Bye.
Thank you so much to Bob Gruen, and thanks to all of you for watching my show, The Lucas Alexander Show, and this special series remembering the Queen of Rock, Tina Turner. Please like my videos, subscribe to my channel, and hit the bell for notifications. Thank you so much. I'll see you again very soon.